Welcome to 340B Leaders Upfront, a new monthly podcast from 340B Report. I'm Anna Mangum, host of this new program, which showcases 340B Report's valued sponsors and the crucial role they play in the 340B ecosystem. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing to 340B Report by going to 340breport.com and using the coupon code podcast25 to receive a 25% discount. If you didn't hear prior episodes, here's a little bit about me. I've dedicated my career to promoting healthcare access, quality, and equity. I've been a senior leader with a variety of major national advocacy and trade organizations, including 340B Health, where I work closely with 340B Report publisher and CEO Ted Slavsky for over a decade. In this exciting new episode of 340B Leaders Upfront, I chat with the founders and executive leaders of CompassRx, Ali Farzad, CEO and co-founder, and Alice Cheng, COO and co-founder. Ali and Alice launched CompassRx in 2024 with the goal of leveraging AI to streamline and improve 340B operations. We're very grateful to CompassRx for being an Ultra Diamond sponsor of 340B Report, the highest level of sponsorship. We appreciate their investment in 340B Report, which helps us to educate our subscribers and listeners on 340B developments. Today, we'll catch up with Ali and Alice and learn more about their careers, the solutions that CompassRx provides, the current and emerging challenges and opportunities in the 340B space, and what they might mean for 340B stakeholders. Welcome, Ali and Alice, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us, Anna.
Thank you for having us. Excited for this.
To start things off, we'd like to tell our listeners about where you grew up and your educational journey. Ali, you're from 340B Report's neck of the woods, here outside of Washington, D.C., and a fellow public health graduate of the University of California at Berkeley. Small world. Tell us more.
Yeah, definitely is a very small world. Always great to meet and talk to a fellow bear, Anna. Yeah, so I guess in terms of myself, I, as you mentioned, started my career at Berkeley studying neuroscience and bioengineering. Wanted to be a provider for personal reasons. Actually, a EMT, a emergency medical technician for a number of years on the provider side. Originally in Virginia, then in California, and I now kind of joke with my friends and colleagues that was my time, working 911 as an EMT. That sort of radicalized me in a way to wanting to come over to the side of health tech. Unfortunately, in the area I was in, one of the hospitals we worked out of decided it was closing its doors. And that hospital's closures have a very strong negative impact on our community. Our 911 response times for some of the poorer areas were going to double, become what felt unsafe, to be fully honest with you. And it kind of opened my eyes to there's so much amazing impact providers make in this country, and we rely on them. But there's so many systematic issues out there as well that you can't really move the needle on as a provider. And I want to kind of touch those systematic issues of systems shutting down, people losing access to care, and kind of make a difference in health tech and using new technology tools, innovation really felt like the most impactful way to do just that. And that's kind of what made that big transition for me in my career.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for that glimpse into your background and some of the experience you had working in the provider side and how it's informed where you are today. Alice, you grew up moving around quite a bit from China to New York to New England. How has that experience shaped your interests and your own career trajectory?
It's definitely played a really large role, not just in shaping my career path, but really in shaping who I am today. Having come from China to the US at such a formative age, I would definitely consider myself really lucky to be able to experience the sort of quote unquote American dream, which to me really is just the ability to be able to carve out your own path and not just be limited to what maybe your family does or what the generations before you have done. I think because of that, growing up, I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to do something meaningful. For me, I was really fixated on becoming a doctor. I think a lot of people can relate to wanting to make their parents proud. And for me, it was, really largely because I was seeing firsthand all of the sacrifices that they were making to make sure I could get an education and pursue the things that I wanted to. I would say around college time, that's when I really started to think about what I wanted to do. I had a bit of a quarter life crisis and really through all that realized that being a doctor wasn't something that I necessarily owed my parents or was even the opportunity that they gave me. What they really gave me was the ability and the privilege to choose what I was actually passionate about. And that's what they never had the chance to actually do. I did spend quite a bit of time soul searching after that, but I realized ultimately what I really wanted to do was to build solutions in healthcare that people like my family could benefit from. People who didn't always have the best access to healthcare or access to medications. And that's, what really drew me to the healthcare space. And I've been here ever since. And I'm proud that I took that leap of faith in myself.
Well, that is a very moving story about the soul searching that many of us go throughout our lives. Ali, as you shared earlier, you started your career on the provider side, but have subsequently worked heavily in health tech. How was that transition for you, and how has your time in health tech progressed?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked this question all the time, frankly. It's weird to think now, and I've spent, just about a decade on the health tech side. And honestly, it's great, but it's different. The kind of impact you make as a provider, physically being there, physically, saving lives is incredible. But being on the other side of things, having the chance to kind of work on, the bigger picture at a higher level, you're a bit more removed from the patient, unfortunately, but you get to touch so many more lives in the process of it. And, when I first made my transition, I was working in McKinsey and Company's kind of healthcare AI work. This was before LLMs, ChatGPT, generative AI is kind of the early days of the space. And there are a lot of other former MDs, PharmDs, PhDs kind of working alongside in that practice. And it kind of showed me the beauty of being in healthcare, whether you're a provider, a former provider, or being on the health tech side. All of us kind of have that same common goal of wanting to help people. It's why we're in healthcare in the first place, to make that difference. And obviously was very fortunate that after my time at McKinsey, had the chance to be part of some pretty novel work in AI, such as the Digital Consortium. If folks listening are familiar, is a AI partnership between 10 plus health systems now, and kind of different opportunities for research, collaboration, bringing things forward, the likes of Stanford, Vanderbilt, UPMC. And it was that work in those days really cemented for me, not just how meaningful this is, but really the impact you can make with these novel technologies like healthcare AI.
Alice, you've worked in the pharmacy space in a number of different capacities, partnering with the pharmaceutical industry for digital health tools, working at CVS Health, and now working on AI to help covered entities. Tell us a bit more about the evolution of your career and how you came to this chapter.
Even though maybe I didn't realize it at the time, I think in my career, I was really lucky to have worked at all of these different places that just exposed me to all the relevant stakeholders within healthcare. And I think that's sort of allowed me to take on a very Swiss Army knife-esque type of approach to the work that I do today. You mentioned, I started working within digital therapeutics. At that time, the space was really nascent. So we spent a lot of time working with the FDA to figure out how we can actually clear these types of apps on your phone with the same level of efficacy and engagement as a drug would. And then after that, also having to figure out, now that it's cleared, how do we work with payers to figure out how to reimburse those software as medical device? And once those two hurdles were jumped through, then the biggest step of all is making sure patients actually use it. So thinking about, ways that we can meaningfully change behavior and drive those outcomes. And then when I went over to CVS, it was very similar, the work that I was doing, but all of a sudden it was amplified to a much, much larger scale. And within just the retail and the specialty pharmacy side of it, all of a sudden I was getting exposed to all these really important problems like capture, figuring out how to educate patients on the different benefits that CVS had to offer, and figuring out how we can actually take advantage of those in a way that drove outcomes. I think a lot of this is directly applicable to the work that I'm doing today. But moreover, I think what it's really allowed me to do is to take the time to understand the pain points of the people that I'm working with, to implement for end users in a way that's actually meaningful. And so I'm just, I'm grateful for these experiences and just how it's shaped my approach to work today.
Well, terrific. Thanks for that. Ali, given your background is more AI, technology focused, how did you find yourself in this healthcare niche in 340B?
During my time in healthcare AI consulting at McKinsey, touched about most things when it comes to health systems and health centers. So was involved in 340B, way back then. But I think throughout my career in the health tech space, especially during my time working with the digital consortium, you keep being reminded of this problem. You keep talking to these different health system executives and leaders across the country. And you also just see everything's happening in the news in the last few years with all the manufacturer restrictions, the proposed changes, the upcoming rebate policy. Seeing all of this and hearing kind of the pain points that, friends and colleagues are experiencing, it's pretty hard to want to stay on the sidelines, not jump into action. Back from my time as an EMT watching a system, unfortunately, have to make one of the hardest choices of closing its doors. I entered this space to help not just keep systems doors open, but make sure patients have access to that care. And nothing really touches that more importantly than the amazing work people do in 340B, and realized I want to be part of that same mission. And thankfully, I've had the privilege to do that here today with Compass.
Well stated. And that really is the purpose of 340B, to provide that access. The two of you were previously colleagues at a couple of startups. What inspired you to join forces to create CompassRx?
I'm happy to talk a bit more about, my experience and how it led to CompassRx. Really, in the first half of my career, I spent a lot of time actually boots on the ground. So within the pharmacy, learning the workflows, understanding the systems that are used day in and day out, and really seeing firsthand the problems and the gaps. And then more in the second half of my career, when I was working, more closely with Ali, I pivoted more to the other side of the equation and spent a lot more time understanding, assessing, and evaluating AI and the technologies that exist to be able to solve some of healthcare's most complex problems. But more so than that, I think really on top of just learning what it can do, spent a lot of time better understanding what AI can't do. And when I was thinking about bringing together these two experiences, in a way, it almost felt like I was sort of sitting on the blueprint to be able to do something really meaningful. I knew the problems that existed, and I also knew what technologies existed out there to be able to solve them. And it wasn't until I had met Ali where I really felt like somebody else was also seeing exactly what I was seeing. We are very like-minded in that when we see a problem, it's hard for us to just forget about it, right? We want to understand why, and we want to know how we can help. And frankly, we have a lot of fun doing it. I think this definitely led to a lot of late nights brainstorming and working, but I'd say no regrets, because ultimately that type of conversation and work was what led to CompassRx.
Great. Well, you have a third co-founder at CompassRx, Zach Wade. Can you tell us a bit more about him and what brought him into the fold?
Zach's, for myself, been a very close friend and a collaborator in the past, someone I trust a lot. But honestly, to be bold about it, I think Zach is the smartest engineer, not the smartest person I've, ever really met. He's quite frankly done it all, from, working in the big tech companies like Google to starting companies in computer vision, a very early field of AI, and selling that to international governments. He's also, just for fun, I think as of last month, a 7-time world DEF CON hacking champion, not the average kind of accolade people have. So Zach has a very unique skill set that revolves not just in novel technologies like AI, but more importantly, regulated ones, working with, like I mentioned, international governments, finance, and healthcare. But frankly, more importantly than all of that, he cares. He cares just so much about this mission and the important work we do as we do. And he's sacrificed quite a lot of other opportunities and other matters to be part of this build CompassRx and kind of make the amazing impact we've all been privileged enough to do today.
Well, that's great. And the passion really comes through. Tell us, now that we understand more about your origin story, what are your products and offerings, and what makes them distinctive in the increasingly competitive 340B AI space?
340B, as you said, is definitely becoming more competitive over the last few years. And, as an AI company, it's really important to us that we're not just making generic solutions and then adding AI over it to sound different from other vendors, right? I think there are a lot of things that make us unique, but I will name three that I think are most near and dear to my heart. First is around our tech team. The way that we approach engineering is unique in that the talent that we have doesn't typically operate in healthcare. But what we're doing is we're pulling in best practices across a lot of other regulated industries. And that really allows us to think outside the box and build things quickly that are not only effective, but are also safe. The second is that we're really thoughtful in how we're building, and more so we're mindful of who we're actually building for. No matter how much personal experience Ali and I have across AI and 340B, we know at the end of the day, what matters most are our users. And so to that end, our tool was built in tandem and alongside health systems. None of our products were built on our own. Every single feature, tool, function I can attest to was requested either by a 340B operator or by a pharmacist who's using the product. And third, not to sound cliche, but we really do believe in our product. And because of that, we put our money where our mouth is. We don't charge anything upfront. We don't charge any AI training fees or integration fees. We know that this product works because of the way that it's been built. And so we are dedicated to not make a single dollar unless we are making our customers money first.
That's terrific. Well, thank you for that. And let's just keep talking here about AI. In one of the articles in your excellent comprehensive 4-part series for 340B report on the role of AI in 340B, you discuss the use of AI to increase covered entity capture of 340B prescriptions. What percentage of eligible prescriptions are covered entities currently capturing, and what are the implications of this for their 340B savings? And also, how do your offerings increase the capture rate?
A lot in there, thank you. And also just appreciate the kind words with our 4-part series. We do love what we do and love sharing about it. So obviously there's, to say the least, a lot of concerns in the world of 340B right now. A lot of things on the horizon. And covered entities now more than ever to make sure they're capturing as much as possible in terms of 340B savings, both of these manufacturer restrictions and these policy changes on the horizon. And what we've come to realize is when it comes to maximizing 340B capture rates, often a very overlooked thing is in-house pharmacy capture rates, making sure you have patients actually using your covered entities pharmacy if you have one. And what we've realized is most folks don't even know what the standard is, where to start. I mean, we've seen the average in the industry being around 30 to 40% in-house capture rate, but best in class is closer to 85 to 90%. That is millions of dollars in 340B savings on the table there, oftentimes being lost. So what we see today, however, is folks that do recognize this problem of in-house pharmacy capture oftentimes don't have the capacity. Your team can't be reaching out to all 100,000 patients you're seeing. And the teams are kind of overworked as is. So what we decided to do was build and design AI agents for just that, uniquely trained for this. There's kind of 2 parts to that. Part 1, identifying what the opportunity even is, getting a sense of what is the pharmacy's leakage, where are the scripts going, how many dollars are on the table, and kind of what are the low-hanging fruits and the things you should be acting on as a system, as pharmacists, as providers. But then the second part is actually acting on that data and taking action. And that's where we've built an AI agent that's almost, think of it as a pharmacy care navigator, reaches out to the patient, educates them, and kind of helps them make informed decisions on what is the pharmacy that's best for them to use, which oftentimes is the covered entity, not just because of the benefits of covered entity, but also the benefits for the patient. And our AI agents work alongside pharmacists and pharmacy techs to kind of make sure they're working hand in hand, making this a bit more doable and just, end of the day, making the best possible patient experience too. Because end of the day, the whole reason we do 340B is for the patients as well.
Well, and on that point, can you tell us more about how increasing capture rates has not only been helpful to your clients, but also to their patients?
Yeah, great question. Definitely, I can talk a bit more about that. So it's actually been pretty well studied that the health benefits are significant when patients are using the in-house pharmacy as part of the care journey. If we think about it, from a clinical perspective, right, continuity of care is exceptionally important when it comes to driving outcomes, and using the in-house pharmacy only continues to bolster that. Even from the audience perspective, as the audience that your pharmacists are better than the average retail pharmacist who can probably provide more for your patients. They have a more holistic view of what medications and comorbidities exist for that patient. They can follow the patient's progress, see when the patient's having adverse health reactions, and be able to escalate in a more timely manner. And this is the type of care that we see ultimately improving adherence, outcomes, lowering things like free admission, and many times also provides cost savings for all parties involved.
Thank you, Alice, for that very robust picture, really, of kind of the patient experience and how this, the obvious other dimension of this, which is cost savings. CompassRx offers solutions for all 340B covered entity types, including hospitals and community health centers, among others. What are some of your success stories?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very lucky to have had the chance to make a lot of impact for a ton of cover entities of various types. I think the thing we've seen the most in our partners in terms of success when it comes to our capture solution has really been that folks where they've been feeling the pain of these manufacturer restrictions, where capture has been a huge priority for them, but also their teams are just feeling the burden. There's so much work and responsibility being put on 340B teams and pharmacists that there was a very meaningful risk of burnout. There wasn't capacity for this type of work. So being able to have our AI agents come in and not just make their teams' lives easier, but make their patients' lives better and give them better outcomes, while also for the system as a whole, because we're capturing so much more patients, seeing an additional 6 figures of 340B savings every single month was a tremendous success for us. And kind of seeing that same story repeated time and time again has made us feel honestly fantastic. We're seeing that kind of impact. And the amazing thing about AI agents is same way a human like you or I, we learn at our job. We get better every day and we perform better every day because of it. AI is the same. The more it does this work, the more data it gets, the smarter it gets, the more it's capable of doing. So these 6 figures of growth we're kind of creating every month, we expect that increase exponentially over time, potentially.
Yeah, those wins are really, really notable in terms of the savings. As you discussed in your series, AI comes with both benefits and risks. Like most health tech, covered entities certainly want to reduce inefficiencies, but not at the expense of patient safety or privacy. What's your perspective on this calculation, especially in 340B? And how do you thread the needle of safe deployment?
Yeah, Anna, that's a great point, and definitely one that we've spent a lot of time thinking about. Given that our tool is one that is actually reaching out directly to patients and playing a role in impacting their care, to us, it's critical that we are not just 99%, but actually 100% secure. And believe it or not, a lot of the AI that's used now on a daily basis isn't 100% secure. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? In the real world, when we're asking like ChatGPT a question or to reword an email, it's making mistakes. And it's okay because it's a level of risk that we're typically willing to take. But in healthcare, when the stakes are people's lives and their well-being, 99% accuracy isn't enough. That's why we don't use any plugin solutions to write our code. And we've really dedicated countless months to be able to build the infrastructure and the guardrails that allow us to say that we're 100% secure without compromising on the effectiveness of our product.
Thanks so much for that. So we're going to pivot a little and talk about some really significant developments in the 340B space, starting with contract pharmacy. Contract pharmacy programs remain under pressure with approximately 40 drug manufacturers imposing restrictions. Although a number of states have recently passed protections in this area, many covered entities are located in states without any relief. Is this a challenge on which you're focusing? And if so, how is CompassRx supporting customers in those states where the restrictions are still onerous?
Yes, 100%. This is a huge, huge area of focus for us. I mean, we saw firsthand what the impact has been on these manufacturer restrictions on our partners and colleagues. But I mean, I will say we are so glad to see that a lot of states are coming together and passing essential protections for 340B and contract pharmacies. What's been difficult to see is some of the stories of manufacturers in some states disregarding some of those restrictions. I think trying to see how much enforcement there's actually going to be. So our priority is going to become for both states that are seeing those issues with the states that don't have any of these protections. How can we make sure those covered entities have as successful and growing of a 340B program while still being compliant to all of these policies and restrictions? You know, as Alice kind of said pretty eloquently, our product is based on what customers ask us for. And they're the ones kind of asking us to help navigate these pretty burdensome restrictions. That's exactly what our capture solution does. And the best part of the capture solution is even for states that do have protections and there are covered entities are allowed to use these contract pharmacies without any restrictions, there still is great benefit to having patients go to that in-house pharmacy. Again, it's better savings for the entity, less 340B kind of compliance, and it's just better patient outcomes. So regardless of the state policy, regardless of the manufacturer restrictions, we are just strong believers in the philosophy that if your entity has an in-house pharmacy, we want patients to take advantage of it and feel the full benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So as if the contract pharmacy restrictions weren't enough, another major concern for providers, as you well know, is the possibility of shifting the 340B program from an upfront discount to a rebate model. Pilot of this model, focusing on 10 selected drugs, is expected to begin on January 1st, 2026. Covered entities would need to front the costs of high-cost drugs in exchange for a theoretical post-purchase rebate, rather than being afforded the discounted 340B pricing at the time of purchase. What are your thoughts on this consequential development, and what does it mean for your providers as well as your patients?
Yeah, the rebate model definitely has been very top of mind for everybody lately. I think, the word that you pick, consequential, really is a great word to describe it. I don't want to belabor the point, as I think a lot of people are aware of the negative ramifications that this would have on covered entities. But, what I can add is, from my perspective, that there is a good chance that manufacturers are already building tools with the use of AI to be able to review and potentially reject rebates. I think what the rebate model really isn't taking into account is that it's creating a bit of misaligned incentives from the covered entity side. We want to use AI that's as accurate as possible because there is a high bar for compliance from all of the audits that happen, right? But for manufacturers who aren't necessarily being audited with the same level of scrutiny, the incentives might not be around accuracy, but more for speed. A good example of this actually happened in the PBM space, where they adopted AI for prior authorization review. And in that case, wanted to get through as many authorizations as possible. But what happened was that lack of concern for accuracy ended up leading to a lot of incorrect denials. And what followed was a number of lawsuits. What's scary for us to think about is that if manufacturers use that same type of playbook that PBMs did, there is a risk of, rebates being rejected incorrectly without a human ever having even looked at it. And so, at CompassRx, what we want to do is we want to make sure that covered entities are equipped with the same tools on this side of the table to be able to make this a more fair process. To that end, we are actively building solutions to help automate a lot of this work for when this program might become a reality come January. For anyone who is listening in on this podcast and might be interested in learning more or even potentially working together, feel free to reach out to me or Ali. We would love to see what we can do here together.
Thanks so much, Alice. And you both have given us so much food for thought, a lot of inspiration, filled us in on so many aspects of both the company and what you offer, and of course, the ecosystem in 340B. Do you have any additional words of wisdom for the 340B community?
Yeah, we've heard from a lot of folks, over the last number of years that more and more so over time that there is this desire to adopt AI solutions. And people realize it's kind of the next thing that's coming. It's super important, but they're worried, either their IT or their infrastructure, their team, for whatever reason, isn't ready for AI. But to be honest, anyone, any system, any covered entity, regardless of how it may seem, is AI ready. All you have to do is pick a problem that needs fixing and just start there. This is just another solution like any other. This is like saying this thing is an AI solution, like it's a solution that uses the internet. It's not the thing itself, but it's just going to be the next generation of technology that will make this easier and better for your team. But mind you, we know it can be hard to know where to start. It can be a scary world, especially as Alice mentioned, when manufacturers and such might be using AI on their side. Where do Kubernetes even kind of begin? For that reason, that's why we at Compass chose to make this as easy as possible. It's why we have only value-based pricing and we charge no costs up front. It's why we have our liability guarantees. It's why we've hit that and maintained very heartily that 100% security and compliance track record. You need all of those things to make this as easy and seamless for both your team, your IT, your compliance, legal, and all of that. So all that to say is, to be clear, goal of this conversation isn't, hey, everyone, you should use CompassRx, though would love that. The goal is just to realize that we're all on the same side here. We all want covered entities to be in the best position they can be. And this technology can really, really help do that. And whether it be with us, their TPAs, consultants, whatever have you, we just really, really encourage folks to look into and explore this technology and its potentials for their team.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And again, to both of you for sharing about your backgrounds and your journeys and more about your company. We appreciate you joining us today. Stay tuned for our next podcast, which will drop next month. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you join us for our next podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing to 340B Report by going to 340breport.com and using the coupon code podcast25 to receive a 25% discount. It's the best way to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing 340B program. Also, check out our other podcast, Inside 340B Report, to hear our journalists discuss the latest 340B developments.